Okay guys, welcome back. Ciaran here from the Academy. Again, just resuming our discussion on Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. So in today's class I'm going to be focusing on chapters 20 and 21. Again, highlighting what we thought was maybe significant or noteworthy in the chapter and why then we think maybe it was significant, or just jotting down in the right-hand column here maybe our thoughts or reflections on that and so on, and building this so that by the end of the novel we have this nice kind of record of what we saw as significant occurring throughout the story, and then what our different thoughts were, reflections on that and so on, and then using that to kind of extract our key moments. And as I said to you before, that's the well then from which you draw your references to support points and discursive points around our comparative modes, around our cultural context, our general vision and viewpoint, and also this emerging theme of identity. And once we've kind of looked at this novel in isolation to some extent, we're then going to start making these comparative connections. But always that should be kind of running away a little bit there in the background. So, what happened in chapters 20 and 21 that was significant? Well, I suppose the first one, I have it up on the board here behind me, is the fact that Kathy becomes Tommy's killer. So just to take a little note of that there, and that their sexual relationship, their intimate relationship begins. So that's kind of what happened, where that's significant, what that might mean, observations about that might be kind of worth noting. I suppose one thing that Kathy flags is the lack of passion within the relationship, that even, as they're becoming more intimate and so on, that it just feels a little bit maybe that it's a bit flatter maybe than she imagined and so on. So this just raises questions. Again, I suppose, heightening maybe that tragic element of the story. Is it a little bit too late? Is it a case that, they were apart for so long, and particularly, from Ruth, that she kind of stood between them, that maybe there's a little bit of like this idea, and it is something that moves throughout the novel, and particularly I'll talk about it when we get to the end, but this lack of fulfillment, this idea that, and I'm just going to throw that up here, too late, lack of fulfillment. When we have this idea of like something is going to live up to these expectations and so on. Not that Kathy was, and she certainly never stated it directly to us, but if we read between the lines, it's kind of obvious that her whole life, really, she's been in love with Tommy. I mean, right from the very beginning, when he was one of her earliest memories that she literally the first memory, I think, from Hailsham that she told us about, was focusing on him, his rage, and then knowing that he loved his polo shirt and all these kind of things. She had all these little details about it. It's very clear, really, the picture that's emerging. Kathy always loved him. But here it's like things aren't quite right. Maybe this idea that, we have expectations about things, maybe hopes for things in life, that don't always play out the way that we expected. So that is certainly something worth noting. Also, I suppose the idea of maybe the reality of the situation is now overshadowing maybe any sense of romance. That the reality of the fact that Kathy and Tommy, that Tommy is his completing, his death is more imminent, but Kathy herself, this is on the cards for her at some point down the line as well. So, it's maybe hard to, I suppose, feel very passionate and really beginning, the exciting phase of a new relationship beginning when that overshadows everything. And again, heightening the tragedy, again, as an observation. Kathy herself even acknowledges that it's kind of hard, maybe in that environment, in that, recovery center environment, to actually feel any sense of passion. But, there's a bigger picture thing at play here. And there's also something else which underlies their relationship, which underlies the dynamic between them and so on, is that they're entering a phase in their lives now, because there was an innocence almost and a sort of a naivety around, we talked a little bit about their attitude towards sex and the slightly, I suppose, contradictory messages they were getting about it, but without, I suppose, the risk of pregnancy, without the risk of STIs and so on. How this, this whole thing, even when they were young, there was a sort of an experimental element to it, probably a little bit happy-go-lucky and so on. Now, it's probably taken on a different tone, and now that they're into their 20s and they're older, the fact that, there's no potential, I suppose, child at the end of all this and so on, could be having a negative impact here on the relationship as well. So, a couple of things we're considering there, and finally, I suppose, the illustration too of the toll that this has taken on Tommy. And the fact that here we have, a young man who should be very vibrant and filled with life and so on, as he was his whole life, is compromised by the procedures that he has had and the toll that all this surgery has taken on him, which again is another element of the tragic element of these chapters. So we get then, skipping on to page 240 here, into that chapter 20, which is very much focusing on that relationship, on the genesis and the beginning of that relationship. But this whole idea of the deferrals really now comes to the fore. We encountered this idea a number of chapters ago in the cottages. There were rumours about this, but now it's becoming sort of maybe a very real possibility, and it's something, again, echoing Ruth's request that Kathy and Tommy, and Kathy flagged this about maybe how Ruth could have pursued other ends in her life, maybe even considered trying to pursue some kind of a life like the dream job in the office that she wished for and so on, and she bitterly kind of rejected that idea. Again, the reality of shattered dreams and that sort of sad element of the novel coming to the fore. But here, with this decision to so I'll just put Kathy and Tommy's decision to pursue the deferral. Ruth had asked Kathy had asked Ruth about this, and Ruth had sort of, acknowledged again that was a springboard for really that whole conversation about the nature of Ruth and Tommy's relationship. But now we have a situation with Kathy and Tommy where the deferrals, if they are real, and of course we probably all have a sense of where this is going anyway, given the general tone of this novel, but then they make this decision to pursue the deferrals. So maybe we just look at page 240, last page in chapter 20, and just from sort of about a third of the way down that page. Tommy gave a sigh and put his head deeper into my shoulder. Someone watching might have thought he was being unenthusiastic, but I knew what he was feeling. We'd been thinking about the deferrals, the theory about the gallery, all of it for so long. And now, suddenly, here we were. It was definitely a bit scary. If we get this, he said eventually, just suppose we do. Suppose she lets us have 3 years, say, just to ourselves. What do we do exactly? See what I mean, Kath? Where do we go? We can't stay here. This is a centre. I don't know, Tommy. Maybe she'll tell us to go back, she, of course, referencing Madame, to go back to the cottages. But it'd be better somewhere else. The White Mansion, maybe. Or perhaps they've got some other place, somewhere separate for people like us. We'll just have to see what she says. We lay quietly on the bed for a few more minutes, listening to the rain. At some stage, I began prodding him with a foot the way he'd been doing to me earlier. Eventually he retaliated and pushed my feet off the bed altogether. If we're really going, he said, we'll have to decide about the animals. Choose the best ones to take along. Talking, of course, about his drawings. Maybe 6 or 7. We'll have to do it carefully. Okay, I said. Then I stood up and stretched out my arms. Maybe we'll take more. 15, 20 even. Yeah, we'll go and see her. What can she do to us? We'll go and talk to her. So that's decision, pursuing the deferrals, very, very significant. A couple of things maybe worth noting there as well about, I suppose, yes, the decision to pursue the deferral. Again, what's this illustrating? The desire, the deep-seated, I mentioned this to you before, the deep-seated desire for more time. And again, the idea that this is a universal human experience, a universal human need, for want of a better word. But this reminds me actually of there's a great film from the early 80s called Blade Runner, and it's a similar kind of a theme in some respects about humans that have been genetically engineered to be superior in strength and speed and all this kind of thing, but have a very limited lifespan. The story of the film is about how a group of them escape, come back to Earth because they're kind of doing work in space. It's set in the future, and basically go to their creator, the guy who invented them, because they want more life, they want more time, because they have this self-destruct thing that's built into their genetics so that they'll expire after a certain number of years. And that film and it has actually been on the Comparative course, funnily enough, up until quite recently. But that film is exploring very much the same idea about artificiality, in the sense that, you know, life which is maybe created, you know, in an artificial and in a man-made way, but like what life is, and this deep human desire, this deep human need to have more time. And that's what we're seeing. So even though these clones have been told their whole lives, this is your purpose, this is what's going to happen, you are going to die, you are going to donate your organs, you are going to complete. And even though there's this understanding that they somehow understand this and they've internalized this in some very fundamental way, we're seeing here that that is not the case. And really the question that Ishiguro seems to be raising is that ever possible? Is it ever possible, no matter how much you indoctrinate somebody, to really fully have them accept certainly an outcome like this, if they have the range of human experiences that these characters have, relationships with one another, love, you know, like even just small innocuous events like, you know, going to Norfolk, things like that, that deep down there's this humanity to them that cannot be denied. So anyway, this all seems to be kind of what drives this this desire, this pursuit of the deferral. And then of course, and this is, I'm sure, where a lot of you are waiting for this phase of the novel, where we start to get a much clearer picture of what's going on. So chapter 21 is really all about this visit to Madame and everything that kind of comes with that, and what we learn, obviously her real name, Marie Claude, because remember the students did say that she was French or Belgian or something, they couldn't remember, or they weren't sure, but they knew that she was, you know, not English anyway. So now we're kind of reinforcing that, you know, the whole Madame thing. But also we learned so much more about her personality and about what motivated her, and of course everything else that comes with that. So let me just, I suppose, draw your attention then. So first thing is just to note that visit to Madame. And that is the key event. That is the big moment here in this novel. And what that actually means then, and the significance of it, well, firstly for us, I suppose, as readers, but also, of course, with clones, for Kathy and Tommy, that we get clarity. We get answers. And that's, you know, the information that we've been waiting for, like what is this gallery particularly, clarity about the gallery and what that is, and how she finds it kind of amusing that the children call it the gallery. She remembers, you know, when that whole process started, but also that she came to think of it that way herself. And in fact, that the students were right, that this was actually an attempt to prove, as Tommy put it, that they had souls. And if we maybe look at page 247, I might just ask you to highlight a line here. So this is 2/3 of the way down the page. Her voice sounded almost sarcastic, and highlight this. Then I saw with a kind of shock little tears in her eyes as she looked from one to the other of us. Now this is specifically discussing the request for the deferral, and this is, you see, that's one thing we get is clarity about the gallery, but we also get clarity about the deferral. So the deferral are just rumors. That confirmation. And in a way it's disappointing, but also deep down, I think, as readers, in the same way that probably Kathy and Tommy experienced it, there's not a huge element of surprise. There's really, and in fact, when Miss Emily reappears, because of course, that is maybe the surprise element to this as well. She does discuss this a little more. So this is really at the end of the chapter here, where Miss Emily is reintroduced into the story, and she's kind of the other person in the room. So that's leading on then into chapter 22, where we really get clarity on the bigger picture, on the bigger cultural context that was driving all of this, and so on. But really, these two chapters, 21 and when we're leading on into 22 and 23, those final two chapters, very much the climactic point of the novel, I suppose, really, in the sense that this is what we were moving towards, driving towards. these answers. So in a way, if we kind of dismantle this as a conventional narrative, this climactic moment is this visit to the dam. Getting to this point, getting some answers, getting some clarity on what this all meant, what was the significance of this within their lives, and then is it possible to defer? So, the first thing I suppose that the deferrals are revealed to be simply a rumor that keeps resurfacing and so on, and then everything else that comes with that. So we'll leave it there for today. Finish off, if you haven't already done, I wouldn't blame you if you had, 22 and 23, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss those and just kind of wrap up the novel in the next class. So I'll see you then.